The Rock Island Line wasn't just a railroad, it was a lifeline for entire communities, from Chicago to Denver, Minneapolis, or Texas. These tracks didn't just connect economies, they built them. Small towns flourished along its routes, industries thrived, and generations of Americans relied on its service to travel, work, and trade. But despite shaping the landscape of the Midwest, the Rock Island Line met a devastating fate. A changing industry, facing turmoil and failed mergers, sent this once mighty railroad spiraling towards collapse, leading to one of the most spectacular failures in American railroad history. So, how did a railroad that created communities and drove economic growth fall apart so completely? And what remains of it today? Stay tuned to find out as we uncover the rise, fall, and lasting impact of the Rock Island Railroad. I'm your host, Ryan Socash, and you're watching It's History. We're about to explore the downfall of the most iconic railroad in the American Midwest. And as much of this disastrous situation was caused by changing markets, some of the worst flaws actually came down to simple things like poor organization. A situation not unique to this story. So it's too bad that back then, they didn't have access to Odoo, the sponsor of this video. Did you know that 90% of businesses fail due to poor organization? It's like trying to put together a puzzle without seeing the full picture. Customers, invoices, inventory, sales. When everything is disconnected, running a business can quickly turn into chaos. That's where Odoo comes in. It's an all-in-one business management software that connects every part of your business in one place. No more jumping between platforms. Odoo keeps everything integrated so you can really focus on what matters. With Odoo, managing your business is effortless. The CRM lets you track and organize customers with a simple drag and drop. Invoices generate automatically and inventory updates in real time. The sales system lets you create quotes and close deals in just a few clicks. Need a website? You can build one in minutes with their website builder, no coding required. Odoo is intuitive and works for any type of business. Plus, you can try it risk-free. Your first app is free forever, and you get a 14-day free trial, no credit card required. If you want to streamline your business and work more efficiently, stop wasting time with disconnected tools. Try Odoo today. Click the link in the description to explore all of its features. Thank you, Odoo, for supporting the channel, and now, back to our story. The Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad, known to most as the Rock Island, was built off several predecessors that were established in the state of Illinois. According to most sources, the beginning of this venture started on February the 27th, 1847, with the incorporation of the Rock Island and LaSalle Railroad Company. As you can see on this map here, the town of Rock Island has been used in railroad titles since the very beginning of Rock Island's line conception. This is largely due to the town's strategic location on the last shred of land in western Illinois before entering Iowa, with another strategic factor being its location on the Mississippi River. With that in mind, it didn't take long for this primitive corporation to be amended into the Chicago and Rock Island Railroad on February the 7th, 1851. Construction began not long after, that same year in October, with the first trains operating as soon as October the 10th, 1852. This first trip operated between Chicago and Joliet, a trip that would have been about 45 miles southwest. Construction continued to the town of LaSalle, the center North Illinois town that was included in the original rail company's title, whereas Rock Island itself was finally reached on February the 22nd, 1852, connecting Chicago to the Mississippi River for the first time in history. Meanwhile, in Iowa, on February the 5th, 1853, the Mississippi and Missouri Railroad Company, referred to as M&M, was incorporated by the same founders of the Rock Island Line in neighboring Illinois. The very first train to get on these extended tracks took a trip from Davenport to Muscatine, a journey completed within the state, I might add. Davenport was the Iowa town directly across the river from Rock Island. And in the end, a bridge connecting the two was completed on April the 22nd, 1856, thus connecting Chicago to Muscatine at the snap of a finger. Despite an air of triumph resting over the Midwest, disaster would strike very quickly. On May the 6th, 1857, a steamboat titled F.E. Afton struck the bridge between Rock Island and Davenport. The bridge was immediately rendered unusable and partially destroyed. In addition to the steamboat itself being obliterated. Hence, the vessel owners brought the railroad companies to court, with a series of different courts providing different cases against and for the bridge. Eventually, the Supreme Court decided in December of 1862 that the railroad companies and their bridges were in the right. Along the way, representatives such as a young Abraham Lincoln contended that the bridge was more beneficial to commerce than that of traveling steamship. The railroads could run year-round, whereas boats could only pass at certain times of the year due to the Mississippi freezing over in the wintertime. Later on, the Iowa M&M was acquired by the Chicago and Rock Island Railroad, creating the combined Rock Island and Pacific Railroad Company, which, for the most part, is how this conglomerate was known from here on out. The railroad would continue to expand through the next decades. At its greatest, in the mid-1900s, the Rock Island Line covered ground from Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Galveston, Texas, and from Chicago to Denver, Colorado. But while Rock Island had expanded further than ever, signs of trouble were beginning to emerge. The railroad industry was changing, and Rock Island soon found itself fighting for survival, which was of great issue to the American public, as many states had land covered by these rails, and the line's famous intercity passenger service was hailed as a relic of America. This operation was extremely successful, and the peak of their business occurred in the middle of the 1950s. Throughout the latter half of that decade, decreasing revenues and traffic, as well as increasing cost, were the very first symptoms of decline. But to avoid that potential of a future closure, officials decided to go ahead and merge with Union Pacific, as at that time, the gigantic railroad corporation UP was trying to form a super railroad through a mega merger, which would hopefully connect Chicago to all of the West Coast. In retaliation, numerous rail companies that would have lost a sizable profit to this collaboration began trying to block the merger. Thus, the longest merger case in the Interstate Commerce Commission's history was about to begin. ICC hearing examiner Nathan Kletinik made a valiant attempt to try and appease all sides of the argument. Between 1964 and 1974, the final resolution determined that nearly all of the Rock Island Line would pass up to UP, with the exception of the Kansas City and Memphis portions. From Rock Island's perspective, this was to be a massive win. However, when UP looked a little bit deeper into the case, they realized that years of deterioration had set in, and disheveled rolling stock meant that they would have to invest substantial capital to make this new arrangement work. Ultimately, they backed out of the deal that had taken a decade to complete. I should also add that the ICC's strict conditions didn't help UP's case from remaining on the project, so the whole thing turned out to be a massive waste of time. Though eventually, in the 1990s, mega mergers between BNSF Railway and UP would resemble something akin to the shape of this original concept. But we'll get back to that in a moment. In the meantime, though, Rock Island was grabbing at any chance they had of survival. Unfortunately, in 1975, they would enter their third bankruptcy. In an attempt to catch up to their debts, Rock Island began looking for a grain funnel course between the Midwest and Galveston, Texas, a port town. This would theoretically help to fund a plan to revitalize the whole system for about $100 million, with a rebrand to The Rock in 1975. Complete revisions and additions to their car repertoire, the company was pushing hard to create any sort of mainline profit. Unfortunately, The Rock, lobbyists, and creditors pushed for a shutdown so the debts would be repaid. With a strike in 1979 from the Brotherhood of Railway Airline Clerks, the ICC finally declared a transportation emergency due to the rail line's inability to transport a grain harvest to the American markets. Ultimately, the Kansas City Terminal Railway took over operations of the line, and on January the 24th, 1980, Judge McCarr authorized an entire shutdown and liquidation of Rock Island and its estates. It didn't take long before Rock Island cars were spotted on other rail lines as new companies had purchased their rolling stock. But it didn't end there. Scrappers were also making a fortune, taking what was left of the railroad apart. Miraculously, in the end, the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Company was able to make all of the money required to pay back both their debts and creditors. In the 1980s, the company changed its name to the Chicago Pacific Corporation and was acquired by Maytag Corporation in 1988. As mentioned previously, the UP mega-merger of the 1990s is where Rock Island would finally end up. The Chicago to Omaha line is the only line that UP does not use for its modern freight business. And it seems that in all that time spent between switching owners and attempting to revitalize the rails, people lamented the past magnificence that the Rock had once offered with its intercity passenger service and their local commuter system in Chicago. I need to emphasize here that Rock Island lines were notorious. Its main routes included trips out to LA from Chicago, Denver, Dallas, or Minneapolis. Limited services, which skipped stations for long-distance trips, were offered, as well as the local service that would stop at each station for closer proximity. But beyond its role in intercity travel, Rock Island was deeply embedded in the fabric of Chicago itself. Well, the long-distance trains carried passengers across the Midwest. Its commuter rail system kept the city moving, providing a vital connection between suburban communities and downtown. For thousands of people in Chicago and its suburbs, this railroad was an essential part of their daily lives. The tracks may have changed ownership, the company may have vanished, but the network it built remains a key part of American rail history. Few railroads have left behind such a lasting legacy, one that still serves millions of people today. That's right. The Metro Rock Island District continues to serve many of the same communities, proving that even after its fall, Rock Island's legacy endures. I will leave it there for today, but I thank you all for watching. Hope you'll click that subscribe button. Otherwise, until next time, I'm Ryan Sokash, signing off.